The air inside the patrol car was stale, heavy with the smell of cheap coffee and cheaper cologne. Riley Parker, 27, sat behind the wheel of their beat-up Toyota Corolla, hands gripping the steering column just tight enough to keep them steady. The red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, slicing through the dusk of a quiet Sacramento suburb. Riley hadn't been speeding 55 in a 55, clocked it twice just to be sure. But the cop behind them didn't seem to care about that. They'd seen the way his eyes lingered when he'd walked past their car at the gas station 10 minutes earlier, clocking the shock of pink hair, the rainbow sticker peeling off the bumper. Riley knew that look. It wasn't about the law. It was about them. The officer tapped the window with his knuckle, a sharp, impatient rap. Riley rolled it down, the cool evening air rushing in. License and registration. He barked, voice flat, but laced with something sour. Officer Brent Hargrove, his badge red, 6 foot something, buzz cut, the kind of guy who flexed his authority like a muscle. Riley handed over the documents without a word, their jaw tight. Hargrove's eyes flicked from the license to Riley's hair, then back again, lips curling into a smirk. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, leaning in just enough to make it personal. Riley kept their voice even. "No, sir, I was doing the limit." Hargrove snorted, straightening up. "Speeding 68 in a 55. Step out of the vehicle." The lie hit like a slap. Riley's pulse kicked up, but they didn't flinch. "That's not true. I wasn't speeding." "You calling me a liar?" Hargrove's hand drifted to his belt, hovering near the holster. The threat was subtle but loud. Riley unbuckled their seatbelt slow, deliberate, and stepped out into the gravel shoulder, hands visible. They'd been here before, not this exact spot, not this exact cop, but this dance. Growing up queer in a small town, you learned quick how to read the room, how to survive the ones who hated you for breathing. Hargrove scribbled the ticket, his pen slashing the paper like he was carving a grudge. "Sign here," he said, shoving it at them. Riley scanned it. $2.50 fine, court date in 3 weeks. They signed, fingers steady despite the heat rising in their chest. Hargrove ripped off the copy and tossed it through the window onto the passenger seat. "Watch yourself," he muttered, low enough that it could have been a warning or a promise, then stalked back to his cruiser. Riley stood there a moment, the tail lights fading into the dark. They weren't speeding. Hargrove knew it. They knew it. But that pink hair, that sticker, it was enough. Enough to make them a target. 3 weeks later, the Sacramento County Courthouse loomed ahead, a gray slab of concrete baking under the California sun. Inside, the air was thick, almost suffocating, the kind of stale recycled breeze that clung to your skin. Rows of spectators filled the gallery, some slouched, some craning their necks, murmuring as Riley stepped up to the defendant's table. It dwarfed them, 5'4", wiry frame, pink hair tied back in a messy bun, but they stood with their chin lifted, hands in the pockets of their faded denim jacket. Judge Evelyn Torres presided, her silver hair pulled tight, her glasses perched low on her nose. She looked down at Riley with the bored exhaustion of someone who'd seen 1,000 traffic disputes, her fingers tapping idly on the desk. "Riley Parker," she read aloud, peering at the file. "Speeding, 68 in a 55. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Riley said, voice clear, steady. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Torres raised an eyebrow, lips twitching into something that might have been amusement. "You think you're going to talk your way out of this?" she asked, her tone dry. "This isn't a negotiation, kid." A few chuckles bounced around. The bailiff, the clerk, even the prosecutor, a slick guy named Paul Dennison with a tie so tight it looked like it was choking him. Riley didn't laugh. They weren't here to play. This wasn't about the ticket anymore. It was about the principle, the pattern, the way people like Hargrove could bend the system to punish anyone who didn't fit their mold. Riley had spent years preparing for moments like this, not this exact one, but close enough. Their older sibling, Alex, had been a civil rights organizer, dragging Riley to protests and community meetings since they were a teenager. While other kids scrolled TikTok, Riley pored over legal blogs, watched body cam footage, memorized statutes. Alex always said, "They'll come for you one day. Know how to fight back." Torres sighed, flipping the file open. "Let's keep this short. I've got a lunch meeting." The gallery snickered again, but Riley's lips curled into a faint smirk. Torres didn't know it yet, but she'd just handed them an opening. Dennison stood, smoothing his jacket, his voice dripping with that practiced polish of a man who'd won before he started. "Your Honor, the state will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Riley Parker, was clocked at 68 miles per hour in a 55 zone on the evening of March 14th. Officer Brent Hargrove, a 10-year veteran, observed the violation firsthand, issued the citation, and documented it per protocol. The evidence is clear-cut. We submit the radar log and the officer's report. The words landed heavy, the gallery shifting, nodding like it was a done deal. Torres glanced at Riley over her glasses. Go on, she said to Dennison, her tone suggesting she'd already made up her mind. Dennison strode toward the bench, his loafers clicking on the tile. The defense might claim this as a mistake, that MX. Parker, he paused, smirking at the honorific, wasn't speeding. But let's be real, Your Honor. People don't get pulled over for no reason. Officer Hargrove had no motive to fabricate this. The radar doesn't lie. The tension thickened. Torres leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Riley didn't blink. Dennison flipped through his notes, confident as ever. Your Honor, I have Officer Hargrove's sworn statement. He clocked the defendant's vehicle, a 2012 Toyota Corolla, moving at excessive speed. The stop was routine. The ticket was issued. End of story. Torres exhaled, nodding. Sounds simple enough. To most in the room, it did. Radar, cop, ticket, guilty. But Riley had spent too long studying the system not to see the cracks. They stayed silent, watching, waiting. The judge tapped her gavel lightly. All right, let's hear the defense. She turned to Riley's assigned counsel, a frazzled public defender named Maria Ruiz who'd barely spoken to them before the hearing. Ruiz stood, fumbling with her papers. Your Honor, my client. Riley placed a hand on her arm, a quiet signal. Ruiz hesitated, then sat. For the first time, Riley spoke again. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. The room went dead silent. Torres stared, clearly amused. You'll what? I'll be defending myself, Riley repeated, calm, unshaken. A murmur rolled through the gallery. The bailiff's eyebrows shot up. Dennison's smirk faltered, just for a second, before he let out a sharp laugh. This ought to be good, he muttered. But no one was laughing when Riley stepped forward, because everything was about to shift. The weight of the courtroom settled around them as they adjusted their stance, hands still in their pockets. They let the silence stretch, just enough to make it uncomfortable, then spoke. Your Honor, before we go further, I'd like to confirm something with the prosecution. Dennison crossed his arms, smirking. Go ahead. Riley took a slow step forward. You said Officer Hargrove clocked me at 68 and a 55, right? With his radar. That's correct. Dennison snapped, already bored. It's in the log. Riley nodded, then turned to Torres. Your Honor, I move to question the validity of that radar evidence. Torres squinted. On what grounds? Riley pulled their hands from their pockets, gesturing toward Dennison's table. Because Officer Hargrove's radar gun hasn't been calibrated in over a year. California Vehicle Code Section 40802 requires radar units to be tested every 6 months for accuracy. If it's out of date, the reading's inadmissible. A flicker of unease crossed Dennison's face. What are you talking about? Riley stepped closer. Your Honor, if the court permits, I'd like to request the maintenance records for Hargrove's radar device, serial number 47291. If it was calibrated on schedule, the prosecution's got nothing to worry about. But I'm betting it wasn't. The gallery buzzed. Torres frowned, glancing at Dennison. Counselor. Dennison cleared his throat, jaw tight. Your Honor, the officer's report is sufficient. We don't need to waste time on this. Riley shrugged, casual but cutting. If the radar's legit, the records will back him up, unless there's something to hide. Torres studied them for a long beat, then turned to Dennison. Any objection to pulling the records? Dennison hesitated. The pause was loud. The gallery noticed. Torres noticed. Counselor, she pressed. No objections, he muttered. But the confidence was cracking. Riley took a quiet breath. They'd spent years listening to Alex break down cases. Cops cutting corners. Evidence fudged to fit the narrative. If Dennison was stalling, they were already halfway there. The courtroom stayed silent, the tension electric. Dennison shuffled his papers, scrambling. Your Honor, even without the radar, Officer Hargrove observed the defendant speeding. His testimony holds weight. Riley nodded, face unreadable. Sure, let's talk about that. They turned to Torres. Was Officer Hargrove subpoenaed to testify today? Torres blinked, caught off guard. She glanced at Dennison. He shifted. No. Riley's lips pressed together. So the state's resting this whole case on a ticket and a report from an officer who isn't here to be cross-examined? No chance to ask why he pulled me over, or why he lied. Dennison's jaw tightened. Your Honor, this is absurd. Riley cut in, voice steady. Your Honor, I'd like to enter evidence. They pulled a slim folder from their jacket, stepping forward. This is dashcam footage from my car, timestamped the night of the stop. It shows me driving 55 the whole way, until Hargrove's lights came on. A gasp rippled through the room. Torres leaned forward. You've got footage? Yes, Your Honor. Installed it after a hate incident last year. Figured I'd need proof one day. Riley held up the USB drive. It's all here. Dennison stepped forward, flustered. Your Honor, this is unverified. It's verifiable, Riley shot back. The metadata's intact. Let's play it. Torres rubbed her temple, then nodded. Bailiff, set it up. The screen flickered to life. The gallery craned their necks as the footage rolled. Riley's Corolla cruising down the road, speedometer steady at 55. No swerving, no rushing. Then Hargrove's cruiser, tailing them for a full minute before the lights flared. The room went quiet, the truth sinking in. Riley turned to the bench. Your Honor, I wasn't speeding. Hargrove targeted me. The pink hair, the sticker, he didn't like what I represent. This ticket's harassment, plain and simple. Dennison scrambled. Your Honor, this doesn't prove intent. Riley shook their head. It proves he had no cause. And if he lied about the speed, what else did he lie about? Torres exhaled slow, pinching the bridge of her nose. The case was crumbling, and everyone felt it. She looked at Dennison. Anything further? He stiffened, face red. No, Your Honor. She turned to Riley, studying them, then spoke. Ticket dismissed. A beat of silence. Then the gallery erupted, some shocked, some cheering. Riley didn't move right away, letting it settle. Torres gripped her gavel, her expression unreadable, but there was something new in her eyes. Respect, maybe. As Riley turned to leave, she called out, MX, Parker. They stopped, glancing back. Torres hesitated, then said, You've got a sharp mind. Ever thought of law school? Riley smirked. Working on it, Your Honor. Outside, the air was thick with voices. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing. Riley, did you expect to win? What's next? They pulled their hood up, ignoring the noise. This wasn't about fame. It was about fighting back. Alex waited at the bottom, arms crossed, grinning. You scared the hell out of me, kid. Riley chuckled. Had to risk it. Alex pulled them into a hug, stubborn as ever. Across the street, Torres watched from her car, her stern facade softened. She'd seen 1,000 cases, but this one stuck. Riley had made the system blink, and they weren't done. Years later, Riley stood in another courtroom, law degree in hand, defending someone else targeted for who they were. The ending wasn't just happy, it was a beginning.